My name was called. Oh, I'm muted.
You didn't turn on your camera, you didn't turn on your mobile phone. Yeah, okay?
My name was called. I stepped up and I scanned the crowd. They were waiting for me to talk about what I knew. I was going to talk about my vision. I was going to talk about my work, and they all wanted to know. And so as I scanned that crowd and I looked in all of those faces and made an assessment to see that there was probably 200 people there, all of a sudden my heart was beating way fast, faster than I expected. And I had this whooshing in my ears and my palms were sweaty and my knees were shaking and my mouth was dry. And when I opened up my mouth to speak, my throat just clicked. I was having a full-blown panic attack. I had stage fright. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters guests, this began my learning journey. No, my quest. I'd walked into the dragon's lair and I was not prepared. Fair to say that I was asinine in my approach. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the capacity, I didn't have a plan in place to slay that dragon, and I was sadly defeated. Fast forward 2 years, and I'm standing in front of a packed black box theatre. The crowd's on its feet and they're clapping for me. I'd actually just delivered a 30-minute keynote speech. And the audience were hanging on my every word. They were laughing at my jokes. They were leaning forward in their seats. I had them in the palm of my hand. I felt triumphant. I felt victorious. I felt successful. I felt joyful. And it wasn't just because I'd stepped up and done a really great speech. It was all of the work that I'd put in, the 2 years of real focus into growing my capacity to be a great public speaker. Let's just get a show of hands. Who here actually shares my desire to become a masterful, dragon-slaying public speaker? Put your hand up. I would imagine that this is a common goal, that I'm actually, as we would say, singing to the choir, preaching to the converted if you like, that as Toastmasters, we all have that goal of developing our public speaking, our communication skills. So not only have I improved my skills tremendously, in that process I've actually discovered three keys to becoming a dragon-slaying public speaker. And in the interests of learning, I'm going to share those with you tonight. Key number 1, take a deep dive into the genre of public speaking. Learn as much as you can. Read books, join Facebook groups, like pages where people are talking about their craft and sharing those things. I have one of those, you can join mine. I have also been the master of the freebie, and I have actually done a course online, which is a university level course, which anyone can do, sailor.org, and it's free and you can do university level theory to understand public speaking. I really rated the opportunity to understand the structures of speeches, the purposes, targeting audiences and being able to really capture their interest and make them act based on what you've said and how you've said it. Watch models. Have a look at people who you think are really good speakers. Get that TED app on your phone and watch a speech a day. Look at people, see how they're actually speaking. Get some heroes if you like and emulate them and try out what works for you. A little side note, I've actually found that when I've explored what other speakers do, that if you compare some really masterful dragon-slaying public speakers to what a textbook might describe, often it's a little different. And I would urge you not just to follow what a textbook says is the perfect way to public speak, but consider how your audience responds. Because it's your audience that gives you the feedback as to whether you are being successful as a public speaker, not a textbook. If your audience is giving you feedback that suggests that you're being unsuccessful, definitely go back to the textbook, go back to those models, keep trying things. But don't be afraid of finding your own style. And one of my favourite speakers, Eric Edmeades, he traipses stages with an undone shirt and Bermuda shorts and bare feet, and yet he is a masterful speaker. Another element that's really helped me to grow my public speaking knowledge was walking into my Toastmasters club and being appointed a mentor. And my mentor gave me a very important lesson. He taught me that a speech only has 3 main points. Whether it's a table topic speech of a couple of minutes or a long keynote speech, 3 main points. And if you stick to 3, you've got a structure you can stick in your head and people can come away knowing what it is that you've said. The rule of 3. So I've taken that away from that experience of having a mentor, and it helped me to actually refine my first researched speech in my first pathway in my level 1 projects from 20 minutes down to the 7 that it needed to be. And evaluations. Listen to how people view other people speaking. Take the feedback that people give you when you're giving a speech. Really take on board what other people are saying about public speaking and do evaluations yourself, because it really does help you to get a real sense of that genre of public speaking. So learn how to do it is key number 1. Key number 2, practice. Nothing is better than practice. You can't get better at doing something unless you do it. So we're all Toastmasters here. Let's get a show of hands of who's finished a pathway, or maybe stick up your hand with how many pathways you've completed. I've completed 1 full pathway and I'm on my 2nd. Nice. And then on your other hand, let's have a look at what level you're up to in your current pathway. I'm up to level 2 in mine. So everyone here has been doing their speeches, right? We're all actively practicing and working towards improving. You know, I reflect back to who I was when I first started at Toastmasters and standing in front of this group who are welcoming and cheered me on and really supported me, but I was still scared. And I'm standing there with my notes and reading them to the people in front of me. And then fast forwarding to that speech where I stood in front of the crowd in the Black Box Theatre, that was a Toastmasters project speech, my level 5 project. And the journey, the growth from actually doing all of those projects was just phenomenal. Take those opportunities to speak, plough through your projects and use the opportunity that's given to us by virtue of being in this wonderful Toastmasters club. And make sure that you practice your speeches before you even get in front of the club. So some people struggle with procrastination. And if you're a procrastinator, if you're putting off practicing your speech before you actually get in front of the crowd to do it, break it down into small parts. Say to yourself, I'll just practice my first line. And then the next time you think about practicing, I'm just going to practice the introduction. You'll grow your sense of success. You'll listen to yourself improving, and that will snowball, and you'll become better at practicing, and it'll become easier. Practice and record yourself on the phone to improve, and then look back and do your own evaluations of yourself. It's amazing how powerful a strategy that is. Practice. Key number 2 to become a dragon-slaying public speaker. Key number 3 is about confidence, and you can grow your confidence. That day when I was going to be doing my big speech in the Black Box Theatre in front of a packed house, I was nervous, and I knew I had to be on top of those nerves to be able to be successful in my speech. We become nervous because we have these brains that have the capacity to imagine and project forward. And when we're projecting forward and thinking about how things might be, we start to get anxiety and get nervous. And the bodily response to that is to release cortisol. We need to deal with that cortisol. Cortisol prepares our body for fight or flight. What I did to deal with the cortisol was to do some exercise. So I got out there and did some really good cardio and shook away all of that cortisol that was sitting in my body. But then I had to make sure that I didn't allow the cortisol to rebuild. I'd have to get out there and do some more exercise. I didn't have time for that. So I did a meditation. And meditation helps to calm the nervous system and prevent the body from releasing those stress hormones that actually put us into that flight or fight mode. To just keep that topped up during the day, a beautiful breathing exercise, maybe some square breathing, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, and holding again. And doing that is like life's elixir. Isn't it amazing that just breathing is such a wonderful, powerful thing to calm us? And then time was ticking and I needed to make sure that I practiced. So I did a couple of run-throughs of my speech, and so I knew that I knew my stuff. That was really confidence building. So I urge you that if you've got something that you're anxious about, a speech that you're anxious about, run through it a couple of times on the day to help you remind yourself that you know your stuff. And then the time came really close. So the clock's ticking. And that has the potential for really growing that anxiety. But instead of allowing that to happen, I focused on the moment, the now. So I would do tasks that didn't require too much thinking, and I just keep plugging away at the things that I needed to do and make sure that I was focused and trying not to let my brain get carried away with thoughts that were unproductive. But because our brains like to think about things and imagine things, it's the downside of being intelligent creatures. Sometimes that's hard not to project forward and imagine. And so we need to make sure that we're focusing on what it is that we're thinking and that we think productive thoughts. A really handy way to keep the brain focused and really train it to positive thoughts is using affirmations. A simple affirmation like, I've got this, I know my stuff. Everybody's waiting to hear my story. I'm just going to speak from the heart. Those can actually really focus us on the positive and just train our brain to stay there. And if we really catch ourselves, if we start to drift into the negative, catch ourselves with an affirmation, we can halt it pretty quickly. And imagine positives. Just give yourself that opportunity to visualize yourself being successful, being that dragon-slaying public speaker. And that will really help your brain to send the message to your body of success, and you'll feel that in your body, and then you'll get up there and you'll give that dragon slaying, confident, masterful public speech that you are hoping to give. So I see that there are 3 keys to growing yourself. Certainly it was for me, to growing myself into becoming a dragon slaying public speaker. Learn the genre, practice, and grow your confidence. 3 things. And I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still developing my craft. And I'm really enjoying the journey and love sharing what I've learnt about these things. If you want to find out more, make sure that you like my Facebook page and you'll be inundated by my passion for public speaking. I'm going to take a Tarantino-esque twist to this speech now, because in the spirit of learning, I want to put a bookend around what I've just told you and step back from it and have a look back at how I've spoken to you. One of the aspects of genre with public speaking is story. We're often told to use stories to convey information, that stories actually speak to people in ways that pure information doesn't. And so you'll recognise that I actually told you a personal story while I was delivering to you information about how to be a really great public speaker, how to grow that skill set. I used structure in an interesting way. I didn't just tell a story with a beginning, a middle and an end in a linear way. I gave you the beginning, I gave you the end, and then I gave you the middle. I did that on purpose, and I had two purposes for doing that. It's all about you as my audience. We're all Toastmasters, and we're on this journey together to become great public speakers. And so I would anticipate that I would connect with this group by having actually talked about struggling as a communicator. And I would feel that I would have connected with the group also by talking about the end game, by giving you the spoiler, by telling you how it turns out. Because that's a common goal for us as Toastmasters. But what we all want to know is the how. That's where the mystery is. And so I saved the how for the rest of the speech. So to grab your interest and then to speak to you about what you're most interested about was the reason why I gave you the beginning, the end, and then the middle. But that's not the only thing we have with story, choosing how to structure it. We also choose what narrative we're going to apply. And this is where the 7 stories come in. Did you know that there's only 7 stories, 7 ways in which we can tell a story? A man called Christopher Booker spent 30 years analysing story, and he looked across cultures, he looked across genres, and he looked across time to distill story down to 7 archetypal narratives. These are wired into our brain. We can't get away from them. And each of them has a standard conflict and story structure, and each of them has a standard resolution way of the story ending. And as listeners, as consumers of story in whatever form it is, we need the story to end that way. And we can choose the story that we apply to what we're telling. It doesn't matter what the set of facts are. So what I'm going to do now is run through those 7 stories, and I'm going to talk to you about what the conflict is, what the resolution is that's expected in that story, and why I didn't or I did choose that particular narrative for you as my audience, Toastmasters, who are on this journey of improvement. So the 7 stories, story number 1. I'm going to start with the tragedy. The tragedy is the story where the hero is embroiled in a situation or surrounded by people who create problems for them. It doesn't matter what they do, they've tried everything and nothing is working to make this situation resolve. The only thing the hero can do is walk away. End it, put it to bed, mourn it, and move on. It would be asinine to apply this story to the development of public speaking. We're here to grow, so let's just put that one aside and move on. Comedy. In the comedy, the hero's really struggling because there's confusion. The truth is hidden, and they get tied up in knots with the fact that this truth is hidden. And the resolution to this is that the truth must be revealed. In terms of telling this story and sharing this story with you and hoping that you come along with that story or perhaps see yourself as a hero in a similar narrative, this really doesn't work because it's clear to us that we need to develop our skills as speakers. So there's no confusion. We just need to make sure that we learn. So that one doesn't work either. Rags to riches. This is the story where the hero has all of the skills and qualities that's required to be successful and to have everything that they desire or need. They're just being overlooked. They're not seen, they're not recognised for having those skills or qualities. The hero in this story just needs to keep committing to being who they are, stay true to themselves, keep working hard. And maybe even get a little bit of help from somebody, like a fairy godmother, to help people see who they are. This story's not us either. We're growing our skills. We're not born into Toastmasters with the skills already, waiting for people to recognise how fantastic we are. We're actually working hard to get better. We're not that person. The rebirth. The rebirth is about a hero who has internal work that needs to happen. This person has something going on that's internal to them that's creating problems for them. They need to reach inside, look inside, do some internal work and change. And if they do that, everything will be better. This does have some application to us, but I think that really, if for us anxiety and manage anxiety and growing confidence was the only part of the story, we could use a rebirth narrative to talk about our Toastmasters journey. But I feel that the narrative is broader than that, it's greater than that, and the rebirth is just a little bit limited in its capacity to be able to tell us and share that story with all of its nuances and all of its elements. Now we're getting closer. Overcoming the monster. In Overcoming the Monster, the hero is pitted against something massive. They have some massive thing that they need to overcome. Monstrous, large, seemingly undefeatable. And they walk into that arena with the skills and the capacity, and the only way that this is going to be a good story is if they're really walking in with honed skills, sharpened tools, and all of the planning that needs to be done. If they walk in there without that, there's no way they'll slay that monster. It sounds a little bit like me at the start of the story. What this denies for us in telling this story is the journey beforehand, the development of that character before they walk into the dragon's lair and take it on. So again, not quite the right narrative. The journey and return. In the journey and return, the hero is suddenly plunged into an unfamiliar world, and this unfamiliar world gives them such a sense of discomfort. They're so out of their comfort zone, and to be able to progress, they really need to develop some skills and abilities to be able to cope in this unfamiliar world, to stretch that comfort zone. And if they're fortunate enough to be able to go back to their normal life, then they are going to be able to experience improvements that stretch well beyond what it was that they experienced. I feel that this does have a lot of application, but there's some elements of the story that are really missing that come up in the next one. The quest. The quest has the hero in for the long game. The hero has an overarching big goal. This is our story in case you haven't figured it out yet. So they've got a very large overarching goal that they're working towards. But that goal is broken down into small parts. They have smaller quests, smaller challenges that they can overcome, and each one of those actually grows their skill, grows their capacity, sharpens their sword, if you like, to help them to be ready for that final overcoming. Along that journey, they have sidekicks, and they have the opportunity to take wise counsel. They train, they practice, they hone their skills, and when it comes to that final overcoming, they are ready. They're ready to slay that dragon. This, fellow Toastmasters, is the story for us in this situation, because we have a club of people. These are our sidekicks in the narrative. They're there to help us. They're there to cheer us on. They're there to listen to us when we speak and give our evaluations. It's so helpful in helping us to grow. We have wise counsel, those people who are there delivering educationals to us. Our mentors in our club who really help us to bounce ideas around and set goals for improvement. Those 5 steps in our pathway journeys, those individual speeches that we make as we work towards becoming that dragon-slaying public speaker. They're our mini-quests as we lead to that overarching goal of becoming a masterful speaker. We have choices about the stories that we tell, and we really need to think about what the conflict is in the situation that we're telling a story about. We need to think about what the pathway forward is, what the resolution is to that story. But as a masterful speaker, you also need to know what is going to appeal to your audience, what's going to draw them in, what's going to actually make them feel like they could be that hero in that place, in that story, and what's going to give them the most empowerment if they imagine themselves in that story, what can help them see the pathway forward that's actually going to lead to the success that is the resolution or at the end of the story. So let's now reflect on everything that I've said tonight, again in the interests of learning. I've talked about the 3 keys to becoming a dragon-slaying public speaker: learning about the genre, practicing your public speaking, and becoming confident. And I've talked about the use of story. I talked about structuring a story for interest and for targeting the audience. And I've also talked about story structures and selecting the story that is actually going to be the one that is most appealing and empowering to your audience. Interestingly, that stuff is applicable across so much of our lives. You can use it to lead people, you can use it to sell things, and you can use it to reflect on yourself. So fellow Toastmasters, we've done a lot of learning tonight. I have been speaking for 26 minutes and I have jam-packed your brain with lots of learning, and I sincerely hope that you perhaps look at the recording and review what I've spoken to you about. And if anyone wants to talk to me about these stories and learn more, please do find me on Facebook or email. And remember, we're all in this together and we're all on that journey to becoming dragon-slaying public speakers. Toastmaster.